All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Limitless Live, where we bring together ideas and individuals that help you unlock your full potential from the inside out. I am your host, Olga Binyaminov, and today we have a very special guest with a very unique topic. Today's topic is one that I am especially excited about. It's emotional intelligence, or as we call it, EQ, and how it shapes our ability to lead and make more powerful, effective decisions in business and in life. We are joined by none other than Justin Bariso, the author of acclaimed book EQ Applied, the real world guide of emotional intelligence. He's also the founder of The Lighthouse, a global EQ community. Justin has made his mission to make emotional intelligence simple, accessible, and actionable, something that we can use every day, especially in our professional lives. Justin, I am so honored to have you today.
Thank you, Olga. I'm honored to be here. You pumped me up with that introduction. It makes me feel good. No, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Glad to hear. Thank you. So let's start from the very, very top. In EQ Applied, you described emotional intelligence in such a relatable, real-world way. For our audience, how do you define emotional intelligence in the context of leadership and professional success?
Yeah, so I think just the first thing to say to that is I think this definition of emotional intelligence applies across the board. So it's just like we might think of traditional intelligence that's going to help you in your professional life, but it's also going to help you in your personal life. And it's the same with emotional intelligence. You work on it at home and it makes you better at work. You work on it at work and it makes you better for your friends and family at home. But what is it? Because it's something I think that we hear more and more about, and we have a new generation learning about it now. But what is it actually, right? So there's two ways to look at it. Just the very simple definition, emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage emotions. So understanding how emotions affect your decision making, understanding how emotions, the role emotions play in your personality, your mood, what you say, what you do, and all those things, but then applying that to others too, and understanding the role emotions play in everyone else's decisions and what they say and what they do. And then I have like a really practical definition that I like to use often, which is emotional intelligence is the ability to make emotions work for you instead of against you. And the reason why we say that is because we're emotional creatures, and that's a good thing, actually. We don't want to take emotions out of the equation. The key is just keeping emotions in balance because we've all said or done something in an emotional moment that later we regret and we wish, okay, I wish I'd handled that differently. I wish I didn't say it that way. I wish I hadn't done exactly that thing. And that's what emotional intelligence is all about, is keeping those emotions in balance so that you're saying and doing things in the moment that you don't later regret. And you go back later and you say, I'm really happy with the way I handled that. It was super high stress, or it was a decision that I took a long time to handle or to decide, but I'm really glad, I'm really happy the way I did it in the end. And that's emotional intelligence, making emotions work for you instead of against you.
Right. And I think you have a nice quote in your book. Emotions aren't the enemy of reason, they are a necessary part of it.
Yeah, that's
And
so true.
right. And in leadership, I find that emotional intelligence is really how you communicate with empathy. You make decisions that are thoughtful, even though you're under pressure, and you build trust with your team, which is so important in leadership and business. Um, but there's still a myth out there, especially in competitive industries, that emotional intelligence are for weakness. What is
Mm.
one biggest misconception that you see about emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so I've seen it actually go two different ways. So one big misconception is to go to one extreme and say, emotional intelligence is not so important. And that's I usually hear from like leaders that have quote unquote made it. They're doing well in their profession. They've become leaders, sometimes even CEOs, and they say, look, I got where I am because I am who I am, and no apologies, et cetera, et cetera. And that's okay to a certain extent. We see different types of personalities succeed. And that's a whole nother story. What is the definition of success, right? Because a lot of these people may be successful in their professional life, but then their personal life is falling apart, right? So just understanding what that definition of success is, but putting that all aside, how much better could they be if they practiced more emotional intelligence? And emotional intelligence doesn't mean not being authentic, not being yourself. It's not at all that. It's, again, going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, all of us have things that we've said or done that we later regret, whether we want to admit it or not. So they may not want to admit it. Oh, I am who I am, and this is how I am. Okay, that's fine. But if you're honest with yourself, there will always be certain decisions we made where we could have done better if we had the chance to do them over. And so that's, I think, the biggest misconception is just completely dismissing it and say it doesn't make a difference. And that's the fewer people. Well, I shouldn't say fewer. There are quite a few people that believe that, but that's just one extreme. Okay. The other extreme is those that put everything in emotional intelligence and they see it as inherently virtuous. It's an amazingly good thing all the time, and that's not 100% true either. There are people that can use emotional intelligence for nefarious purposes, to manipulate other people. I like to call this the dark side of emotional intelligence. But that's why you need it too, right? Because the more emotionally intelligent you are and the more you practice and hone this ability, then the less susceptible you are to the ones that are trying to use the dark side of it. So I'd say those are the two big myths that I see in daily life.
Yes, I absolutely love this. I always say that emotional intelligence is not about avoiding a conflict. It's about showing up with those tools, as you said, and those tools are mostly self-awareness.
Oh yeah, big time.
So in your book, you call self-awareness the foundation of EQ. How can professionals start develop more self-awareness at work, especially those in the leadership roles?
Yeah. So like you said, self-awareness is definitely the foundation. And that's because we can't we all want to be able to manage ourselves and our emotions, right? But you can't do that until you start to understand the role that emotions are playing in your decision making, and understanding the reasons why you're making decisions that you do. Then you can start to manage it more. And then similarly, you can't really understand others until you start to understand yourself. There's some exception to that, but maybe the better way to put it is the better you understand yourself, the better you can understand others too. And then you can start to use those skills to manage relationships too. And that's why self-awareness is really the foundation that it's all built upon. So as far as, how do you do it? Well, there's different tools that you can use. I think it's basically, it just starts in being observant in yourself and also having sometimes tough conversations with others about yourself and how you're being perceived. That's a really big part of self-awareness, is seeing yourself the way other people see you, in addition to the way you see yourself. Now, what I mean by that is we know certain things about ourselves if we take time to think, reflect. I'm big into journaling to help me like kind of figure out why I'm thinking the way I do, why I make decisions the way I do. So we have an advantage because we can get inside our own mind, which other people can't do.
Correct.
However, we also, there's this saying that perception is reality, which isn't 100% true, but it is in a sense. What it means is when the way other people's are perceiving you, that's their reality, right? So no matter how we think we're coming off to others, if others are seeing us as brash or arrogant, or they're seeing us as too meek and too what's the right word? Too quiet and too weak, basically, then it doesn't really matter how we see ourselves because we're not, that's going to get in the way of us reaching our goals too, right? So being observant of yourself, having conversations with people that you're close with, and seeing how you're perceived by others. How do you think others perceive me? How do you perceive me? That's really the beginning. And then we have specific tools that we teach people to use too. Like um, there's two in particular. One I like to call replay. And replay is somebody tells you something good. This is for the good moments. So replay is for the good moments. Okay. So someone tells you something that they appreciate about you, or, they send you a nice message. You did something. Hey, thank you so much. Taking a moment to kind of bask in the sunlight, so to speak, and see, okay, this is something I did that someone really appreciated. Maybe it's also a good performance at work. It's a good presentation you gave. It's a project that went really well. Take a minute and examine what went well, why it went well, how others perceived what you did. Why? So you can do more of that. And so you can, kind of repeat these good experiences. Now, the other tool is what I call the emotional postmortem. And here's where something goes bad. You said or did something that you regret, a project went really badly, you made a major mistake in your personal life or in your professional life. Now, taking time to basically do a lessons learned analysis and say, what led me to say and do this thing? How can I avoid certain situations? Some situations are going to be unavoidable. So if I repeat those situations, how can I keep my emotions in balance to keep me from going down that path that I don't want? And how can I handle the situation differently in the future? Now, this is a lot easier said than done, right? It's not going to be like an overnight process. But the more that you're doing, using these tools and kind of conducting these exercises, then you're gradually building self-awareness and you're gradually building self-management, the ability to actually do something with this knowledge that you're gathering.
Right. So basically, what I'm hearing is that when you start asking those hard questions, but you also opened to the hard answers, as you described that, that's when you are self-aware.
Yeah, yeah, it's all part of it. And again, the good and the bad.
Yeah,
So, if we focus just on what we're doing wrong, then that's also unhealthy.
of course.
It's a lot of it is looking inside and outside and seeing, okay, what am I doing well? What are my strengths so that I can leverage those strengths? And then identifying then also the weaknesses and seeing, okay, how can I mitigate or lessen those weaknesses?
Right. And you teach so many different practical framework. For people that get nervous before a presentation or a struggle in some tense meeting that they have, can you share one emotional regulation strategy that can help them, those individuals, when they have this high stress moments?
Sure. Yeah. So, there's this tool in psychology known as cognitive reframing, and that's a fancy name for just saying changing the way we think about something. Okay. So, how do I cognitively reframe? I'm going in nervous, I'm going in anxious. How do I reframe the way I think about this to kind of change the way I feel about it? Because this is the big thing is thoughts. Okay, there's different schools of thought, okay, but most experts agree that if you influence your thoughts, then it's going to have an influence on your feelings. Reason why I say there's different schools of thought. Some think that thoughts come first, then feelings, or feelings come first, then thoughts. But most agree that if you exercise a certain amount of control over your thoughts and what you're thinking, then it will affect how you feel, right? So if you go into a presentation, if you tend to go into a presentation, I actually applied this today. If I go into something like this, a podcast, I know this topic well. I tell people I eat, breathe, and sleep emotional intelligence, but it's different when you're live talking in front of other people that are listening to you and you get afraid. What if I make a mistake? And I start to get nervous. And I used to have this thing where I'm so nervous. I'm so nervous what I do. And you just keep repeating this thought, right? Well, how do I reframe that now? Okay. So instead of saying I'm nervous, I say, I'm excited. I'm excited about this. This is going to go well. I can't wait to talk about this. And I use that excitement to help me go over what are some of the points I want to say. Because even though I know all this stuff well, again, when you're in the pressure moment, it's harder to do. You might start thinking, you might start going off a different path. You might start thinking, okay, what are people thinking about what I'm saying right now? But you know this, huh, Olga? So just repeating, using that excitement now and that to kind of feed your energy beforehand to practice. I spent some time this morning going over my answers, actually saying some of them out loud. That makes this situation easier.
Right.
Another reframing technique I use is just telling myself that everything is temporary. Okay, this podcast interview is only going to last an hour. I might flub it up. I might make a mistake. That's okay. It's temporary. Everybody makes mistakes.
It's
Few
okay.
people.
Absolutely okay
It's
to make
it,
mistakes.
Exactly. And few people put a magnifying glass over those mistakes like we do, right? So just remembering everything is temporary. Everyone's basically going to forget what I say today.
Right.
Hopefully not too soon because I have some valuable things I'm hoping to share. But that just again it lessens the nerve. So those are a couple tools, anxious, nervous. A couple other ones like in the professional setting that I really like to teach. I learned this one from a comedian. You might remember this one from the book, Craig Ferguson, famous television personality, comedian. He said there's three questions you have to ask yourself before you say anything. Does this need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? Does this need to be said by me now? And he jokes, oh, it took me 3 marriages to learn this lesson, and okay, it's kind of funny, but it's true. And I tell you, Olga, I use this rule every single day of my life. And many times I don't get past the first question. It's like, does this really need to be said? Other times I get past the first question, does this need to be said by now? And the answer is absolutely not. This needs to be said, but let me choose a better time to say it. And other times, you get past the two questions, and the third question, the answer is a no. Other times, the answer to all three questions is resounding yes. I need to say this, and I need to say it now. And now you can go in with confidence, and again, not regretting what you're saying because you've gone through that quick mental process. What I love to tell people is that we're all taught to think before we speak, but we're rarely taught how to think before we speak. And for me, these three questions are exactly it, because think before we speak it's so general, it's so broad, it's easy to skip, it's easy to not apply. But here I have a 3 question framework that I basically am using multiple times a day, every single day. And it really helps me to speak up with confidence when I need to hold back. For example, a leader in a meeting, okay, you might be tempted to speak up, but are you going to now hinder everyone else from speaking in the room? Are you going to unduly influence the conversation? Are you going to say something too early without hearing the true thoughts and opinions of others? See, that's where this kind of 3 question framework can come into play. But I add a fourth question because some people don't have that problem. Some people find it very hard to speak up, also in a meeting or when other people are around. And for them, I recommend a different question, which is, will I regret not saying this?
Mm.
And again, that can motivate you to actually come out. You're kind of the shy, reticent person. You don't, they don't need to hear this. But then fast forward tomorrow in a week, will you regret not saying this? You know what? I think I better say this. And then that can give you the motivation to actually speak up and say something. So that's just a few tools. There's a bunch of them. Maybe if we have more time later, we can share some more. But that's what we're using.
Definitely amazing tools. And as I told you before, this month I'm focusing on love and relationships, and I do this
Mm,
Monday lives. Oh my God, something is happening here today. I'm doing those Monday lives, and today I tailored to our meeting, to our Zoom, and the topic was communication. So one of
mm,
the things that is so important is this relationship is important enough for you to say a couple of words to ruin it. And
mm,
what I often tell my clients is between the stimulus and your reaction, there is this
mm.
sacred space. And
Yeah,
that is the EQ that help you with your own space. And what I suggest, one of my tools is pause, reflect, and respond, right? So
love it.
wait for a second, because we're all very emotional beings. We want to say what we feel, but pause for a second. And as you
Yeah,
said, maybe in your mind, ask those 3 questions before you actually reflect or respond to something that was said. And this is very hard to do. It sounds very easy, but it's
yeah.
difficult. It's a lot of work on yourself to be able to understand how something you say may affect the other individual. So that's
Yeah.
really great. And I know you have amazing tools in your book. So definitely very highly recommending.
I'll, if it's okay, can I share one more? Because you made me think of it when you talk about like the love and relationships. And like we said, it goes on both sides, right? Because this applies to professional and personal. So here's another, I call this one the golden question. And it's actually 5 questions in one. And if you're struggling with something or if you're about to do something and you're not sure if you should do it, ask yourself, how will I feel about this in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year, in 5 years?
Mm.
And many times, man, that question has done wonders for me to stop me from doing something, heading down a path that, I'm just really angry in the moment. Oh, I need to give this person a piece of my mind. How am I going to really feel about this in a month or a year or 5 years? I won't care about this at all. But what could happen if I follow this path? Okay, and that's enough to kind of hold you back from doing something that you later regret. And we talk about that in relationships because it's so easy with the people that we care about the most and the people that we love to say and do things that we later regret. And can we imagine how that would be? Oh, I'm just so angry, I'm going to say this, but what's the reverberation of what you're going to say? How are you going to feel? What if that is the beginning of a breakup? Now, a breakup doesn't usually happen over just one event, although it can, right?
Right.
But is it going to start you down that path of something that just really starts to tear you apart? So I really like that one too. You just
Yeah,
made me think of it, so I wanted to share that one.
absolutely great. And thank you so much for sharing this. But everything we're talking about so far is really thinking for a minute. But what happens in a fast-moving industry where you need to make decisions like really fast? How does emotional intelligence or EQ supports better decision making under pressure?
Yeah, so there's a few things. So you need to decide which decisions need to be made quickly and which decisions you can take more time for. Because if a decision needs to be made quickly, then yeah, you don't want to be taking a week or a month or longer. But even if a decision needs to be made quickly, then you still want to pause as much as you can. So even if it's just, you know, let's say that someone is waiting for, okay, before we get there, to help you even in quick decisions, and there's two more questions now you have to ask yourself. Is this an easily reversible decision?
Mm.
And how much is at stake with this decision? Because, okay, if it's easily reversible and there's not much at stake, some combination of those two, then why spend so much time thinking about it, right? Because hey, if it turns out to that you need to reverse it, you can reverse it. And if there's not much at stake, then there's not a problem, making a quick decision, even if it's not the best decision. Because there's something called emotional fatigue, right? Or decision fatigue, where we can only make a certain amount of decisions in a day. And if we're giving so much time and energy to even small, reversible, low stake decisions, then we're going to run out of energy for the bigger decisions that count. So that's one thing to ask. Now, what if the decision is not easily reversible and there's a lot at stake? Okay, well, now you want to take a bit more time for that. And maybe that means, coming back to the board and saying, look, we need more time to make this decision because if we make the decision too quickly, then it could blow up in our face. And what's the consequences? It's going to cause a trickle down of numerous decisions that are affected adversely, right? So not all decisions are created equal. So kind of figuring that out is going to help you. And then once you figure out the answer to that, then I recommend two things, which is one, getting used to some of these tools. So we teach tools to help you make better decisions. Like this is, we just talked about a couple of them using these questions. Um, Another tool is, well, yeah, I don't know how much we get into that. It's a long story. We'll save that one. But using tools to help you make quicker decisions. We compare it, I don't know if you'll have any listeners here that are chess fans. I'm a big chess fan. I'm not so great at it, unfortunately, but I love the game and I love learning about the game. And Gary Kasparov was one of the greatest minds of chess. Some say the greatest chess mind ever. And I was watching his master class, and so many of his lessons to chess can also be applied to life.
For
And
sure.
he talks about um, taking uh he said they're when you are a good chess player, you're kind of learning these principles that help you to make quicker decisions because you've seen the situation a bunch of times before, right? And so it's easy now to just make a quicker decision and apply a decision you've made in the past or use a tool or a framework you've used in the past. And that's why I'm so big on using these frameworks because it helps you to make quicker decisions. But there are other decisions, like he said, that this is a crucial moment in the game, and we apply that to life. This is a pivotal or crucial moment that's going to affect a bunch of other moments. And now you want to take a little bit more time. You don't necessarily want to make a quick framework-based decision, although frameworks can still be helpful, but you want to maybe use a few different frameworks to help you make that decision. So kind of a long way to say, to help you make those decisions in high pressure moments, figure out which decisions you can make quickly and that you don't want to waste too much time and energy on, and then do that. And one more phrase I'll share with you that I like to use in those situations, I like to say, run the experiment. Run the experiment. Because what's going to happen when you just say, okay, let's run the experiment? You make the decision, and one of two things is going to happen. Either it's going to go well, great, or it's not going to go well, but it's relatively low stakes, it's reversible, and you're going to have data that you can take now to make a better decision next time, to either reverse the decision, or even if it's not reversible, that you, okay, well, let's not do that again next time. Next time we know to do this. So yeah, using those tools and frameworks to help you make quick decisions when you can, and taking the time to make those bigger decisions when you need it.
Absolutely. And it's funny enough that you mentioned chess. In my learning center, it's one of the most popular classes that we teach.
Really?
And when I advertise it, I always say this is the game of life. If you can master
So
chess,
true.
master life. There's so
So
much
true.
to learn. But back to emotional intelligence, I think it helps you when you understand what you're doing, it helps you just separate facts from feelings. And then your response is a lot clearer, right? So with
Yeah,
emotional regulation, you basically reduce the cost of impulsive decisions, which so many
definitely.
of us do.
Definitely. Definitely.
Just, can you share a moment, maybe from your own career, where EQ changed the course of a decision or a leadership moment?
Yeah, so I'll share one from outside of my career first. And here's maybe I can talk about this tool that I mentioned a few minutes ago that we didn't get into. There's something called the milk carton rule.
Hmm.
And the milk carton rule, to give you some context, it actually comes from a an example in a psychology textbook where this man, husband, is getting super upset because his wife is always she gets up earlier and she goes to work earlier, and she always takes the milk out and pours in her coffee, and she leaves the milk out. And so when he gets up later and he has his cereal, there's not cold milk for his cereal, and he's like talking to his therapist and like, see how this shows that she doesn't care about me, and she's just so this, so that, and the therapist, listens like a good therapist does and takes all this in. Okay, let me ask you, how many times has she done this? Oh, I can't count anymore, thousands of times. I've asked her. Sometimes she does it, but then she always reverts back to old behavior. Okay, okay, okay. She's done this thousands of times. Obviously, this is one thing she's doing. There's many good things she's doing for you in the relationship. But what's happening here is you're demanding her to change her behavior. And okay, yes, maybe it'd be more thoughtful for her to put it back in, but is she really doing this to spite you or because she doesn't love you? Or is she doing it because she's in a rush and sometimes she remembers and she tries and other times she forgets? Okay, that's the answer. So in the end, what can you do? He asked them. What can you do about this? What if you just bought two cartons of milk? Now, we're not saying that every problem is, this easily solved, and we're not saying this is necessarily the right solution for this problem, but it applies this milk carton rule, which is focusing on what I can control versus what I can't control, right? And so that's a long lead up to, we see this over and over again in business and life. And so like one example that's been really big in the news lately is Taylor Swift, which she is one of the most accomplished musicians in history at this point. But some may know this story that she lost control of her master recordings from the first, I believe it was 5 or 6 albums she recorded back when she was a nobody. Nobody knew who she was. And she lost it to someone that she had a really bad relationship with. It was someone that she felt was a bully. That's a whole separate story. But basically, she was so down about this. And, what was she going to do at this point? Well, she made a brilliant decision, which was to focus on what she could control. She had zero control over who now owned her master recordings, but instead she decided to re-record all those albums, relaunch them. And since she owned the rights to the writing, she could then, that's one of the reasons she could, request her fans, for example, even radio stations to play these new recordings, which eventually reduce the power of all those old recordings, right? So that's like one example of emotional intelligence in real life, where she could have really gotten down and eaten up, gone into a hole, thrown a pity party for herself. Instead, she said, "What am I going to do? I'm going to take control and I'm going to focus on what I can do about this situation." And long story short, she eventually got control of her original master recordings too. So I mean, she won everything in the game. But that's there. You'll see different examples, and I study this because I've spent over a decade now looking at successful business leaders, successful musicians, successful teams and team sports and professional athletes. And you see kind of these stories start to repeat themselves in different ways, right? So that's one real life example. When it comes to me and my career, I have some of those bigger examples, but honestly, it's the everyday where this is really proving useful to me. And I often compare emotional intelligence to a muscle. It's like a muscle that if you continue to exercise it, then it's going to continue to get stronger. Like I said, I'm talking, I'm working with, I'm speaking about this every day, basically. My kids are tired of it. Sometimes my wife gets tired of it, but she's seen the value of it too. But even with that, I still make mistakes and I still have those emotional moments, right? But because I'm exercising that muscle every day, it reduces the number of times I make those mistakes. And it helps me to also learn from those mistakes better. And so I can, say that it's affected basically the trajectory of my work of me kind of building this business. There were times when I thought I would give up and I would just, try to do something completely different. But because of these emotional intelligence tools, they help me not only to keep going, but to actually build something that is successful and that I feel is hugely important in my life. But now at the same time, now that could start to start me down a wrong path where I get consumed by my work. I'm happily married. I have 4 children. And I found a point where I was starting to get consumed by my work and spend less time than I really wanted to with my family. Or work was always paramount, and can you play with me, Daddy? Oh, just give me, 10 more minutes. 10 more minutes turns to another hour, turns to another 2 hours. And so emotional intelligence tools have helped me in that case too, to see, okay, how do I keep all of this in balance? I love my work, that's true, but there are other things I love actually more than my work, and keeping all those things in balance. So it's really changed the trajectory of every aspect of my life.
Yes, for sure. And I love this. Emotional intelligence doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes. Making mistakes is totally natural, normal, and as long as you own your mistakes and you don't look for blaming others for what you had control over. Certain things we, as you said, cannot control, but the things we can control are really the ones that we can make an impact on. And
Exactly.
there's so much of success in business that is about relationships. How does EQ help leaders build strong teams and help resolve conflicts more gracefully?
So I have this saying I like to say that emotional intelligence is everything. Oh, no, no, I'm sorry. Emotional intelligence is almost everything, and almost everything is emotional intelligence, just because all our conversations have emotions beneath the surface, right? Everything we do, every decision we make has some emotion involved with it. So when it comes to relationships and relationship management, and that's one actually of the 4 abilities of emotional intelligence. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship management. It all comes down to um, examining. Okay, well, first of all, it comes down to what your goal is. Okay. Emotional intelligence, just like traditional intelligence, we use it to help us reach goals, achieve goals. So, for example, um, when we are trying to give feedback to someone, there's different ways to give feedback. And we're talking about what people refer to as critical feedback. Some people call it criticism, some people call it negative feedback. We all need feedback to help us improve. We all have blind spots. We all have things that that we don't see, and we need people to help us improve. That's why even the greatest professional athletes have coaches, right, to help them see those blind spots and fill them, adjust to them. But what one type of feedback might work for one person is not going to work for another. Some need you to be a little bit more direct, a little strong. Others need you to be a little soft. They have more fragile egos, right? So going back to what we said a minute ago, emotional intelligence is goal oriented. So how can you achieve the goal? What's the goal in giving someone feedback? Well, it's not to criticize. It's not to make them feel bad. Maybe for some it is, but that's a whole nother story. For most of us, the reason why we're giving critical or negative feedback is to help a person, right? So just changing the way we view that. I'm not giving critical feedback, I'm giving constructive feedback, right? Now, how do I give constructive feedback? Well, again, you have to get to know the person and what works for them. So I'll talk about the personal for a moment. So I have 4 kids. They're all very different in personality, in the way, in what works for them. With my son, I can be very direct, and he's fine with that, and that's what's going to help him. Now, of course, that doesn't mean, I'm mean in how I say it or I yell at him. Still, how I say it is still going to play an important role, right? But my oldest daughter is very different from him. And if I give her the feedback in the same way that I give him, it's totally not going to achieve the goal. She's probably going to end up in tears. She's going to completely close me out. So that's in the personal, but it's the same way at work. The way you give feedback to someone, you have to adjust it depending on the person. And that takes practice and you have to learn. Now, there are certain frameworks we use, tools that we use to kind of start you off. But I was talking to a mentor of my own. He was the CEO of a medical device company for several years. And he said, you know what, these frameworks are great, but you eventually have to realize that you have to adjust and adapt them depending on the person, because not everything works for every person. And I said, there's a lot of truth to that. And so again, that takes practice, but being aware of that first, self-awareness, being aware of what feedback works on you, being aware that what works on you is not going to work on everyone. And you see how this kind of, it's like a tree, it starts to branch out. And as you start to examine things, you just start with the simple. Okay, what kind of feedback do I like and works on me? That already might completely change the way you give feedback to someone else, right? Then you start to learn from others that that doesn't work for everyone, but a slightly adjusted way will. Or maybe they need something very, very different. And gradually over time, but paying attention not just to what you say, but how you say it. Building, I use this illustration, we talk about building trust among people. And, what does it take to build trust? We talk, you'll hear a lot of things about, you'll hear terms like psychological safety and you need to create safe space. And I'm a big believer in all that stuff. But just to really simplify it, one of the biggest, easiest ways to build trust with others is to be helpful. Just help them. If they need help with something, take a minute out of your day to help them out. Do they want to talk about something? Our default might be, I'm busy right now, maybe later. No, take 5 minutes to hear them out. In the personal life, your spouse comes home from the grocery store. Take 5 minutes to go help them take the groceries inside. Take 5 minutes to make them a coffee. When you're make yourself a coffee, make a coffee for them first. And those little helpful acts, I call them single brush strokes in a huge painting of trust, because they don't seem like much at the time, but the more helpful you are to these people, what happens? You start to build a culture, a relationship of trust where people see that you're not, in the professional context, you're not the boss or the teammate that's out to get them, that wants to criticize them. You're the helpful one. And so when you ask them to do something, then they're ready to basically run through a wall for you, right? Because of all the different ways you've helped them in the past. So I'd say those are the 2 biggest things. Be helpful. That's how you build trust. And then pay attention to not just what you say, but how you say it.
Oh, for sure. And I love that you mentioned that it's culture, right? Because it can become
Mm,
part of an organization's culture. So, how would an EQ look as a culture in an organization, and how can leaders embed this into training values when they're hiring?
yeah, great question. So what does it look like? Well, I don't know if some of your listeners might be familiar, the company Netflix. Years and years ago, they came out with this slide deck for their new employees. You know this. And it's really great, actually. There's a lot of, I don't agree 100% with it. There's some things I don't agree with, but I think there's a lot of great principles in there. And one that's really stuck with me through the years is culture is not a set of statements that you put up on the wall. Culture is what you prove is important to you and your organization by who you reward and how you reward and what you punish. So in other words, you have all these companies that will always put like the same kinds of stuff up on their wall. Companies like Enron, which was guilty of all kinds of corruption and fell apart, or Theranos, which I think has been more recent in the news. They probably had a lot of these value statements up on the wall, but did they practice them? Did they reward the people that were actually doing this? Did they punish people that were speaking up when they saw something that wasn't right, for example, or do they reward the people, the managers that are very, very productive, but speak to people like garbage, right? Or do they reward the people that are actually speaking in a respectful way? That's what culture is. So I do think it's important to define what culture is. And I'm a big believer when you talk about, okay, how do you instill that in an organization? Big believer, a teammate, there was a team of about 6 of us that were examining culture and teams in a huge organization, global nonprofit. And one of the things that really came out from our examining what makes effective teams and how do you build and maintain an effective team is you need to get the team to buy into something together. So we saw what a lot of good teams have done is they come together and they form kind of their own set of values together. And now that accomplishes a couple of different things. First of all, what does that look like? So you might, put some questions together as a document or an email, ask people to come, to give some thought to them, and then you come back and you discuss them. And together as a team, you decide what are your value statements? What do you want to reward? And that does a couple of things. Number one, it makes it clear and defined so that everybody's on the same page, because not all the suggestions may make it into that final document. We called it a team charter. So not all the contributions may make it into the team charter, but you want to respect everyone and you want to try to take something from everyone. And at the end, you have something that everybody's on the same page with. And now you can go back and say, okay, are we following this? Because this is what we said we want to do. In the non-emotional moment, or the emotionally balanced moment, this is what we came up with. And now that we're in an emotional moment, we may not be speaking as respectfully as we said we're going to. We may not be making the decision the way that we said we're going to. But if we have this charter or whatever you call it in writing, we can go back to it and allow this to help guide, okay, how do we want to manage this situation? That's the first thing it does. The second thing, in getting everyone's to kind of contribute to that, it gets them to buy in because they see that you've respected them, that you've invited them, and they've helped build this thing. And there's something also, a teaching in psychology known as the IKEA effect, which says that we place an inordinate amount of value on something that we help build. When we build something from IKEA, we feel attached to that thing because we help put it together, right? Now, a lot of times I was talking about like overestimating the value of something, but I use it in a completely different way. That's how you get people to buy into your solutions, and that's part of change management too, allowing people to have a say in how you're going to solve problems and using what they say. When you do that with building this team charter or document or set of mission and values, then that's going to help them to buy in. It's going to help everybody to be on the same page. It's going to help everybody to work together. And when you get to those emotional moments, it's going to give you kind of a North Star that you can go back to help guide you.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if you can see right behind me, there's a slogan on the wall that says team together
I
everywhere.
do see it.
And it's definitely something I go by. I think as a leader, as an owner, how we present things and how we show up is what they learn. And I've learned throughout the years that empathy, communication, and emotional regulation is so important. Your employees, your teammates are actually looking at you, and what you show is how they learn. And as I hire people, even though education is so important, we have learning for teens, kids, adults. I don't just hire for IQ, I hire for EQ.
Yeah.
And if a person cannot express and manage their own self. How would they manage teenagers or kids when they come with those difficulties? So I think it's important. And through your community, the Lighthouse, what are some recurring challenges that professionals face when they apply EQ in actual real world settings?
Take a sip of water here. Yeah, so there's a couple things that we're seeing. So first of all, this the community is brand new. I just started this 3 months ago, but I'm really excited and I'm really happy to see how it's developing because not only, a lot of people join this community because they follow my work and they wanted to learn from me, but I am equally learning from the ones in the community. And we did a survey recently on, what you love or what you appreciate most about the Lighthouse, because there's a lot of different things we offer in there. But it was 100% answer rate. They all chose the same thing, which was getting to know and learning from fellow members. So it's been a huge thing. It's still very new, but I'm loving the experience. And a couple of things have emerged as being common challenges. One of them is dealing with those big moments. So even though everybody in there knows what emotional intelligence is and is trying to develop their emotional intelligence and practice it, again, we still make mistakes, right? We still have those big moments when um, we lose a job, or if we work for ourselves and we lose a big contract, a major client, we get into panic mode. What do we do? Okay, how do I handle this? And we've seen that question come up a couple of times. We've also seen um, the challenge of dealing with someone that is above you in the hierarchy. So you are, because the Lighthouse is aimed at and targeted at business and professional leaders. But many times they may answer also to someone. So maybe they are an executive, but they answer to the CEO, or maybe they own their own business, but they're answering to a major client, um, and dealing with those persons that are not handling things in an emotionally intelligent way. Those are two of the big ones that we see. And we're just trying to teach, okay, for the first one, remember, those big emotional moments come and we don't always say and do the right things, but what can we learn from it afterwards? It's also a nice thing because they can come in before they've made a decision and get advice from emotionally intelligent peers. And sometimes it's just a matter of getting reassurance. They kind of know the right path, but they second guess themselves and they say, you know, just by asking that question and they get answers from their peers and say it makes them feel better about what they already were going to do, but now they can make that decision with more confidence. Um, and then with the second problem with dealing with those that you have to answer to that are not handling things in an emotionally intelligent way. Again, focusing on what you can control, but getting that advice, like, okay, what would you do in that situation? And that's not to say that you will necessarily do it the same way, but hearing kind of a variety of answers can kind of help you pick and choose and see, okay, that would work, maybe that won't work. And it helps you to see things from different perspectives.
Yeah, through trial and error, absolutely. So for some who are listening and they want to begin this journey of emotional intelligence, what would be the first step that they should take to build their emotional intelligence?
Okay, so here's my one plug. I would direct them to my website because there's a bunch of free resources there. You don't have to buy anything. You can read articles. We also offer like a free emotional intelligence course that's basically, we talk about these tools and these frameworks. It basically gives them 7 of those for free. And so, and it's all delivered through email. So like each day you get a new one. And that kind of gives you, we talked about the 3-question rule. That's one of them. There's others in there. Um, that just kind of gives you a nice structured approach to, if this is important to you, here's something for free that can give you some structure and help you to start to develop your emotional intelligence. But if you don't want that, if you just want to start tackling this on your own, I'd say the biggest thing is start being observant of yourself. Ask yourself this one question over and over again after a situation. Did my emotions help me or hinder me in that situation? If they helped you, how did they help you? How can you do more of that? If they hindered you, why did they hinder you? How can you do less of that? What can you do differently next time? And I think that's the one big question that can really help everyone to start to be more aware of how emotions are affecting them and others, and that's something they can start to build on.
That's beautiful. And I will add your website right underneath in the
Oh,
comment so people could definitely reach out. I think it's a great resource. Justin, thank you so much. This was so insightful, and you've been really taking those big concepts and giving us practical, such empowering tools to just lead with more heart and more clarity. So I really appreciate that.
well, thank you too, Olga. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm a big fan of the work that you're doing, and you asked some amazing questions. It really got me thinking, got the wheels turning. So hopefully we gave your audience something they can really use today.
Thank you so much. And to everyone that's listening, your emotions aren't a liability. They are a guide. Emotional intelligence isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about being aware, and it's about being intentional. And if you found this conversation valuable, please share it. Tag us and let us know how you are applying emotional intelligence in your life. And until next time, stay limitless.